We were on a cruise a year ago today.
We were on a cruise a year ago today. Absolutely right, Cindy. We miss all
Yes.
y'all, don't we there? And
Oh, yes.
so instead of welcoming you to the high seas, tonight I will welcome you to Sanctuary Online Live, our Tuesday night event. And tonight, as with every Tuesday night, it's going to be a fabulous evening for you. I want to welcome you. And I want to encourage people to go ahead and enable your video and ensure that you're in gallery view, which means you can see more than one person speaking. One of the things that's important to us at Sanctuary is to make sure that we keep building community. So seeing your faces does wonders for that. We also would love you to open up your chat box and type in your first and last name, your email address, and where you're calling in from, maybe even how you've been connected with us at Sanctuary. Cindy, as you said, you might be from Sanctuary at Sea. I can show you my bling glass that I take with me everywhere, my wonderful bling from the cruise. Might be from Sanctuary Online, might be from Sanctuary in the Woods where we live. And also, if you'd like to, you can put your phone number, a cell phone number, in the chat box, and that will give us permission to send you a text every Tuesday afternoon, a nice little reminder text that says, hey, tonight is the continuation of Ken Martin and Toby Johnson on gender. So great reminder. If you put your phone number in there, if you'd like to put your phone number in there privately, you can private message Barb Crabtree in the chat box, and she will grab your phone number. We'll keep it private and put that in our text line. Barb, how many folks are you texting every Tuesday? About 40
now? Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that
I think we actually need one more tonight and we'll be at 40.
Oh, okay, then someone's got to put their phone number on there for us tonight. Yes. Hey, and speaking of Barb, I'm not sure if y'all were with us last week, but man, Barb, thanks so much. Barb did an amazing presentation. Again, really informative, but also a lot of fun. How we as individuals who want to contribute and make a difference on Giving Tuesday, which is December 1st this year, or if you're working for a nonprofit that you'd like to support or that is in need of support. Barb helped us learn how we could make more than a donation, how we could make a difference. So if you missed that, please head right over to our YouTube channel, and that presentation is there on our YouTube channel. For the rest of October, tonight again is Ken and Tony. I'll share more in a moment. Next week, we're incredibly excited to invite you to our introduction to TDF theory. It is, without bias, an absolutely life-changing communication tool. So there's a little tiny link in the chat box right now. If you click on that, it'll send you to a real tiny little inventory that will help you prepare for next week's event. But we're very excited about that. And then at the end of the month, our book club, we always close the month with our book club. Our October book is Where the Forest Meets the Stars. I know Cheryl is just a number of pages before finishing that, and she can barely be here tonight and stop reading for a while. So if you haven't gotten your book, there's plenty of time. Oh, goodness. So this all began, my friends, this work on gender, this really great and interesting and exciting and educational, goodness, work on gender. Last month, Ken opened up with really kind of a very, I want to say, it was academic Ken, it was intellectual Ken, but you boiled it down so that it was really understandable. The differences between biological gender, gender role, gender identity. And again, what I think was really powerful for me, Ken, was when you shared how these differences and the confusion between them continues to cause unnecessary suffering and violence in our world today. You brought that home in a really, really profound, gentle and firm way at the same time. And the week after that, Ken, you interviewed Toby Johnson. And that interview was so, I don't know, it just couldn't end. It kept going and going and going. And so everyone said, let's do this again. And so what we did is we asked Toby if he would come back And my screen is frozen, so this is not a good thing. We asked Toby if he would come back and join us tonight, and Toby agreed to do that. Let me try and freeze my screen real quickly here. So Toby, your book.
I'm here.
There you are here. I appreciate you being here. Hold on here. I'm trying to unfreeze my screen, and I'm not sure if I'm having luck or not. There we go.
Oh, unshare.
There you go. But first, I want to read this screen for you, Toby. I want to say that Ken began the interview last time with the really going a little bit into the book, Two Spirits: A Story of Life with the Navajo, which really was a historical novel about spiritual wisdom and life and love and gender diversity. And this evening, I know Ken may want to bounce into the book as well, but we also want to continue to ask you, Toby, about your life and your work, and again, the intersections of these great topics of spirituality, sexuality, and mythology. So with all that, Ken, I am going to stop sharing and invite you two to take us on a journey. Again, friends, if there are questions along the way, please go ahead and type those right into the chat box, and Barb or Cheryl or I will grab those. And Ken, if you see me waving a hand like this, or Toby, if you see me waving a hand like that, that means we have some great questions or comments in the chat box. And beyond that, it's all yours, my friends. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Joby. And thanks again, Toby, for being with us. We are, and by the way, tonight we're going to try to answer some of the questions that were asked the last time. So I want people to know, that the questions that they put into the chat box that we were not able to get to because of time, we're going to try to answer some of those this evening as well. So I want to welcome again Dr. Toby Johnson. It's such an honor to have you with us and to continue this discussion, which just became so interesting that we just couldn't stop it the last time. As Joe said, this began when we began talking about the subject of gender. And then I had read Toby's novel, Two Spirits, which is a story about gender diversity among the Navajo. And it's such an important book that we invited him to come and talk to us. And then we just got into so many peripheral kinds of issues that are raised when we began talking about these subjects that we just had to try to continue this. And so again, with Toby's permission, and Joe, this only takes about 3 minutes. I do want to do this real quick summary of the storyline of the book again for people who may not have been with us before, and it won't hurt any of us to hear it again because it's really interesting.
Absolutely.
Just so that in our conversation this evening, people will know who we're talking about and what we're talking about when we make specific references to the book. And I want to thank Barb Crabtree for transcribing my synopsis from the last time so that I can read it straight through this time. And it should take even a couple of minutes less. So thank you, Barb. So this is a synopsis of the book that began this whole discussion for us. Toby's book, Two Spirits: A Story of Life with the Navajo. Two Spirits, first of all, is historical fiction. And what that means is that most of the major historical events in the book are real. They actually happened, and many of the people in the book are historical figures. You can Google them, you can go to history books and read about them. And then the literary device for historical fiction is to place fictional characters within real history in order to move the plot line, the storyline forward. So this book begins in the 1880s in Virginia with a young man whose name is William Lee. Will is about 20 years old. Will's father is a very conservative fundamentalist preacher. And after he, after he catches Will with another young man, Will has real reason to believe that his father and a group of other men from their church plan literally to stone him to death. And so he runs away. And an older gay man gives him a letter of introduction to the Secretary of the Interior in Washington, D.C. And so Will goes there, he has an interview, and then totally to his own consternation, without any kind of preparation or training or experience. They put him on a train and they send him west to Fort Sumner in New Mexico as an official Indian agent of the federal government. And when Will gets there, he finds out that he's part of an experiment known as the Bosque Redondo experiment. And this is a real historical experiment. And what had already happened by the time that he gets there is that about 12,000 Navajo men, women, and children have been rounded up from their homeland in the north, and they have been forced in what history calls the Long Walk, in a march south down into New Mexico, where they are promised food and housing and a much better way of life. When Will gets there, that all has transpired already, but about 1/4 of the Navajo, about 3,000 of them, have already died on this march south. And when Will arrives there, he finds out that the Navajo living are living in squalor. They're living in horrible conditions. And it doesn't take him long to figure out why he got sent there, because as it turns out, General James Carleton, who is an actual historical figure and was in charge of Fort Sumner at the time, along with a group of other very powerful military and political men, have created a huge corrupt enterprise in which they have moved all of these Navajo south so that they can do a land grab of their land in the north, where these men believe that they're going to find a lot of silver and gold. And they think that Will just be a passive, compliant, complicit part of everything that they are doing. The other thing Will figures out very quickly is that actually millions of dollars have been sent from Washington to Fort Sumner to try to provide housing and shelter and education and everything for the Navajo. But this same group of men have stolen most of that money and kept it for themselves. So during this time, shortly after he arrives, Will is trying to get to know the Navajo people whom he is supposed to be representing. And he sees this tall, slender, beautiful young Navajo woman. And up to this point in his life, Will's erotic attractions have always been to other males. And so he's really surprised by his reaction when he sees this person. Over time, Will finds out that her name is Hasbai, and that she is in fact what the Navajo, what we now understand to be a two-spirit person. That means that Hasbai's biological gender is male. Hasbai has a male body, but her gender role is both male and female. And most of the time she dresses and acts as a female, but not just as any female, because as a two-spirit person, she is the very powerful spiritual leader of her clan, which is a part of this larger Navajo population there. So over a period of time, Will learns all of this about her and about these other schemes and embezzlements and things are happening. So Hasbai and Will, along with several other people, over a period of about 2 years, try to expose all of this corruption. And they finally succeed when the federal government sends General William Tecumseh Sherman, the actual famous Union Civil War General Sherman. They send him to evaluate this Bosque Redondo project. And what he finds there just horrifies him. And so he succeeds in shutting it down. And he's instrumental in making it possible for the Navajo people to go back north to their homeland. And so during all of this time, Will has been exposed to Navajo spirituality. He's been exposed to the way they embrace gender diversity, to their understanding of human sexuality, to the ways in which they govern themselves. And all of this has literally transformed him as a human being. And so he finds a way, as the people are moving back north, to fake his own death so that all the white people think that he has actually died. But in fact, he and Hasbai have been married, and the two of them joined the other Navajo people on their march back to their homeland, which is what would now be northwestern Arizona, and the two of them live out their lives together there. So again, there's your 3-minute introduction to a 500-page novel And let me just tell you, if you're wondering what book you want to first snuggle up under a blanket with in front of a fireplace as the weather changes, you're just not going to do any better than this one. You can buy it at tobyjohnson.com, and we're going to give you, Joe's going to show you information later this evening about Toby's website, about where you can become familiar with all of his books and how to order any and all of them that you might want to. So with all of that said, Toby, as we begin our discussion tonight, I want to sort of remind us of one of the things you taught us the last time, which is so important. It's what you called the honorable meaning of myth. In many of our minds, if you talk about a myth, it just means something that's false. But in this honorable meaning of myth, a myth is a story which contains a truth which we want to pass on to other people. And you talk about the importance of fiction writing and storytelling as a way of creating our own myths. Many of us know that for a long time, other people created our myths. Other people created the myths about us. For example, as I was growing up, the myths I learned about me as a gay man were that, one, I was dangerous around children. I could not be trusted with children. I wanted to molest and recruit children. Second, I was told there's no such thing as a happy gay or lesbian relationship. You can't actually have a long-term happy relationship. Third, I was told that we're all disease carriers, and so we're dangerous to everybody. And then the worst myth for most of us was that God hates us, that God hates us. And so all of that mythology, other people created around us. And so the point that you were bringing home to us was the importance of our beginning to create our own myths, and to understand what a myth, really means. This is so important to so many of us who grew up in a conservative Christianity where we were taught that everything was literal. So just understanding our own religious stories in this new way is so powerful to us. For example, I was thinking, in Hebrew scripture, we have this wonderful little story about Jonah, and I probably heard 100 sermons about Jonah growing up, and they were all about how God created this miracle that this real man fell in this real fish's mouth and lived there for 3 days. And isn't that wonderful? And doesn't that make God great? The truth of that story is that God said to Jonah, I want you to go over to Nineveh and preach to those people. And Jonah didn't want to go. And so Jonah went down to the dock at Joppa, and there was a ship sailing east to Nineveh. There was also a ship sailing west to Tarshish. And so Jonah got on the ship sailing west to Tarshish, thinking, God's going to forget about this Nineveh thing. But there was a big storm on the sea, and the people on Jonah's ship were very superstitious. And so they decided the storm was because God was mad at Jonah. So they threw Jonah overboard, and the fish swallowed Jonah. And 3 days later, there was this great marine belch, and up comes Jonah onto dry land. And then God comes back and says, so Jonah, now how do you feel about going to Nineveh? So if we just think that story's about a real man getting swallowed by a real fish, we miss the mythic truth of that story. And the truth is, if God wants you to do something, it's a good idea not to have to be asked twice and to do that. So you opened up a whole world for many of us last week, Toby, and believe me, this is the most talking I intend to do tonight. But I wanted us to begin there because that is so big and it is so important to so many of us. And so last week, one of our people asked this question, which I did tell Toby about, because I think this is just an incredibly important question. This is from Victor Floyd. And Victor says, first of all, bravo, Tony. And then he says, your words remind me of Joseph Campbell's power of myth and how mythos, even in the Bible, in Genesis, Job, etc., is more powerful than just factual history. What worries me, and here's this really, I think, critically important point for the moment in which we live. What worries me in this is how current conspiracy spinners are weaving falsehood into mythos. How does real mythos, real storytelling, manage to stand apart from false myth? Would you like to try to tackle that, Toby?
Well, oh my God, you've given me so many things to start with. Thank you for inviting me again. We had a wonderful time last time. I trust this will be good. It was wonderful, Ken, listening to you tell the story. In a way, I think that I shifted the topic last time, and I'm sort of doing it again, shifting the topic away from talking about gender to talking about storytelling.
Yes.
Now, the way it turns out, a lot of what we know about gender all comes from the stories we tell.
That's right.
You know, where in the question, Joseph Campbell is mentioned. Some of you who were here last time will maybe remember this. You know, my entree into all of this, I was a young Catholic. I was in religious life, going to be a teaching brother, and was assigned Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, for a class in Jungian interpretation of literature. And it just changed my understanding of what religion is. Campbell, remember, he's the Power of Myth guy, and back now it's been 20, 30 years, but he had done a series of interviews with Bill Moyers, and those got run on PBS and rerun every sweeps week, because that was one of the most popular shows that PBS had. I fortunately knew him when I was lived in San Francisco through the 70s, and had gone to a workshop that he had taught, and ended up, I was a work scholar and was asked to arrive early to help clean the house, and he arrived early, so I ended up meeting him outside of the seminar, and he was a very nice man, and it was a wonderful experience meeting him. I ended up getting a job working at that retreat center for another 5 years. Saw him every year, and then worked his talks in the Bay Area. So I really became a Joseph Campbell fan. And one of the reasons was because this comparative religions perspective, looking at religion not as a revelation of truth, which is to a specific set of people, but religion as a phenomenon around the world that different cultures all share, but that looks different in different cultures, with different stories, different histories, different emphasis. As a young homosexual, I discovered that was incredibly releasing of all of the worry about sex and fear of guilt and God, and all the stuff that I had been taught as a young Catholic kid about sex. I think in general, all of us who've ended up openly gay and within religion and within MCC, within Christianity, we've all had to make some accommodation for the literal ideas of the religion. All of us have to say, well, those lines in Leviticus don't apply to us, or they don't mean that, or what difference does it say in Leviticus? We're living now, and our goal is to follow the teachings of Jesus, not all this strange church law that is accumulated over the years, a set of rules to keep people in control, literally to keep the poor poor and the rich rich. It's interesting to see that when you look at mythologies, and I'll use that, you know, some of the other religions all, don't include historicity as necessarily the verification of truth. We have this idea in Christianity that that the historical events around the life of Jesus actually happens proves that Christianity is right. But there is truth to that. I mean, there's Jesus did exist as a real historical person in a way that perhaps some of the other characters in other religions, like Krishna in Hinduism, didn't ever really quite exist. It's a story. So we do have that claim, but on the other hand, the stories were written 100 years after he had died. The people who wrote the stories maybe knew him. We don't even know that. And much of the story is an elaboration on this guy's life to explain a whole set of historical events about the rise of a heretical sect within Judaism that was dismissing taboo in order to emphasize interpersonal connections with people. Some sort of a political revolutionary movement in Rome that upset the Romans. You know, the stories, I don't mean to go off on a tangent, but I was thinking about this week. Let me get her name. You know, I'm not going to get her name. There is a woman, a wonderful theologian who's written about the Gnostic Gospels. Elaine Pagels.
Yes.
And one of the observations she makes is that the early Christian scriptures did not have the stories about the Passion and the crucifixion. It was acknowledged, but the story wasn't there. After the Roman persecutions and Christians start being martyred for their belief in Jesus, then these stories get written in to show that Jesus too had been cruelly murdered. So if you lose your life because of your faith, you are like Jesus. Well, that doesn't say that the Passion didn't happen, but it does say that the emphasis in the story got changed because of later history. These stories rise out of specific occasions. So as you begin to, if you just learn about other religions in the world, you see that our religion is like those other religions. However true or untrue it is, the important thing is how it makes us feel about life and how these stories support us in being good people. Now, so I'm talking about this as a novelist, because I think that one of the ways that we share myths today, very different from the way, 2,000 years ago when Christianity or Hinduism or Buddhism, all these religions were forming. We have novels and books. We tell stories about people's lives. And now we have television and movies. The way we get our wisdom, Ken spoke about this noble meaning of myth. The meaning of myth in the comparative religions language is the complex of stories that convey certain bits of wisdom, with the wisdom usually being how to live a good life, how to cooperate with other people. And to go back to our question, you actually posed me a question about conspiracy theories. I think that part of where these myths, the stories come from, is the evolutionary process that is creating a better and better human being. To put that into theistic terminology, as God created us and created us to keep growing and become more intelligent, more spiritual, more cooperative, built into us is this storytelling. And the basis of those stories is about how people overcome problems and become better people and help other people become better people. That's the basis of all stories.
That's a great answer. I think that's a great answer to the question about how can true myth stand up against false. I'm glad you talked about comparative religion, Toby, because the first in the beginning of next year, we've already scheduled for these Tuesday evenings. We're going to do two evenings on how the great living religions began and what the great living religions believe, because that's so important in terms of the bigger picture of what you're talking about there. And when we look at something like the stories within Christianity, you hear, we've got in the Gospels, we got Jesus' conversations with certain people and certain stories that he told. Can you imagine how many thousands of stories got left out? So why did these particular ones, get told over and over and over again? That has to be the answer to Victor Freud's question, which is that true myth, which reveals real truth that we want and wisdom that we want to pass on, is always moving us forward. It's always making us better people. The French priest Pierre Teilhard de Chardin said everything is moving toward what he called the omega point. Everything is moving toward becoming perfect. Everything is moving toward what it was originally meant to be. And so any story we can tell that increases love and peace and harmony and unity, those have to be the true myths that we have to tell. And these other stories, there's a lot of mythology going around in our culture right now about how Black and brown people are dangerous to us, and how, all of this mythology that's out there, we can sift out what is real and true and wise. We just have to use, our own judgment about what moves us forward, as you say, as a people. Toby, I want to move on to
Can I say something to that just for a moment?
Yes.
Talking about the conspiracy theories for a moment. It's really interesting to see that there are people who believe something like the QAnon that just seems so ludicrous, but in their world, it doesn't sound ludicrous. And part of, I hope that we try to, in our positive stories, stick to facts when they're about facts. They don't need to be about facts. They can be about mythological or fictional characters. But when you're talking about facts, you really are supposed to stick to facts. And the QAnon people don't particularly. But I think it reveals that people's whole worldview can be different from ours. They maybe see the sky as red and they just call red blue. So we never discover that we're actually speaking a different language. The French people, they have a
this
different
is
word
so
for
important
everything.
right now because there's so much division happening in, among families and friends, because these, people some of the people literally who raised me and taught me to be a compassionate, loving person and to know the difference between right and wrong, now passionately believe that the world is being run by a secret cabal of pederasts and Satan worshipers who kill and eat children, and that includes Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton and some of Hollywood's biggest stars, and they truly, passionately believe that, and so that's why, it is important what we believe. Toby, I want to go to your science fiction novel, Secret Matters. You referred to this a little bit last week. You talked about in your science fiction book, Secret Matters, about this race of people who changed color as their emotions changed, so that they were incapable of lying. And you use several phrases just kind of in passing that have just really become important to me. You talked about gay innocence. You talked about the fact that in a new myth, we don't eat the apple in the Garden of Eden. And so all of the dualisms that come from that, we don't have to believe in those things. We don't have to practice those things. And Alex, one of the people who was on last week, he said, this is our new myth. We didn't eat the apple. And so we don't have, so we don't have to participate in all of this dualism. Could you just talk a little bit more about that? Because that just seems really important right now.
Okay. Well, let's talk about the color change in the people. That's one of the neat ideas in the book. In fact, that sort of happens with us. When we're embarrassed, we turn a little red. We blush. We sometimes smile. One of the things they say is that when you lie, you touch your nose inadvertently. You just can't help it. It's one of those things. Donald Trump does that. What I was hypothesizing was that a blushing system much more developed, in which their whole bodies sort of ripple with color from red to gold to greenish to bluish to black, sort of going through the racial colors that we've got or something, so that human beings could turn. With that being a metaphor for being transparent. I think that one of the important virtues is transparency, showing what you really feel, telling what you think, being honest with what's going on, and not having covert agendas and secret plans and lies to manipulate people. If we all just knew what each other was really saying, and we could see it in the color of their skin, if every time they told a lie, they turned dark purple, well, then you'd know, and people wouldn't lie because they would know they were going to turn dark purple. I think that is, in fact, one of the stereotypic traits of gay people, is that we are a little bit more honest with who we are just by being openly gay. These are all stereotypes and projections, and I don't really know any straight people, so I don't know how. I don't have any basis for comparing. No, I do know straight people, but it does seem like we have a simplicity. Some of what in gay men is called effeminacy, I think, is acting childlike, and especially when we're young, childlike behavior is sexier, more appealing. They say everybody loves the baby cats because the eyes are bigger. Young people who look innocent are lovable for that reason. I think it can actually be an affectation that you pretend to be younger and more lovable and more innocent than you really are. The Groucho Marx joke, when you can fake sincerity, you've got it made.
Right.
But I think we are simpler and can be. I think this happens developmentally, that we don't exactly have to we don't go through the period in late childhood of shifting our friends from our same-sex friends to opposite sex sex partners or romance partners. Um,
Mhm.
I speak as a male, so I'll use male images. But you know, my best friends were other boys. As I began to develop sexuality, I found that some of the boys who were my friends, I was now interested in seeing what their bodies looked like. They were my friends. This just grew out of my natural friendship with them. Whereas the straight boys had to at some point say, well, I can't hang around with the guys anymore. I mean, they still do, but you know, I've now got to date girls, and my interest in my friends are going to be female rather than male. So there is a kind of an overturning of feelings.
Yes.
Now it comes across as perfectly natural. I'm not saying that this, but we don't go through that. It's a smooth transition
Right.
for us. And I think for that reason, at least when we're little, we experience those sexual attractions as innocent. And at least if you went to Catholic school, you were told that those attractions of the girls are sinful. You're not even allowed to think of girls without clothes on. That's an act of impurity. And St. Peter or your guardian angel or someplace is writing this all down.
Right. Toby, one of the quotes that from last week, you said, our role today, our role, meaning with this sensibility that you're talking about right now, our role today is to calm patriarchal notions of what it means to be male or female. And I see that in what you're talking about there, you know, that there is what you talk about is gay innocence or a kind of a simplicity or a transparency, that we're much more comfortable without those dualisms, that we didn't eat the apple. And so we don't have to think it's either this or that. It's always black or white. There's no gray, there's no in between. You know, I was on a panel one time and somebody asked me, what's the most important lesson you ever learned in your life? And I said, and I still believe the most important lesson I ever learned is that two things can be different without one being better than the other. We don't have to buy into all of these dualisms, you know. And so when you say that our role today with our unique sensibility is to calm patriarchal notions, I just love that because they, you know, there is almost a fierceness around you know, what it means to be male and female, and anybody who transgresses, you know, is going to be punished in some way. Toby, we've only got a few minutes left here, and I want to go to one thing. At the very end of the book, I mean, literally on the last page, Will is wondering about what's going to happen when the hairy faces, when the white people come in great numbers and everything changes. He wonders what's going to be there. And so he chants to himself again and again a Diné phrase, a Navajo phrase that Hasbai has taught him. And the phrase is translated as continuing and recurring long life in an environment of beauty and harmony. And when I read that, the first thing I thought of was, you know, within Judaism, there is the concept of tikkun olam, which means to heal the world. And within Christianity, you talked last week about Christianity is not about sin and damnation. Christianity is about caring about other people out of love rather than out of some kind of legal obligation. And all of those things fit together. And so, you know, as we close here, this journey that we've been talking about, that we go on this mythic journey, you know, to get from where we start to where we hope we can end up. All of those things seem to me to say that the ideal place to arrive is the place where we realize that everything is connected, and that the best we can do with our lives is to commit ourselves to something bigger than we are, something bigger than just our own desires and interests and so forth. Is that what Will was doing there at the end of his journey? He suddenly was able to embrace all of this?
Yes, I guess so. Sure. I will say, within the context of my writing those passages, I think what I wanted I wanted to address the issue of how we today understand what the Navajo culture was about back then. We aren't Navajo. We don't have the Navajo worldview. We don't. I mean,
Right.
maybe actually some of you are could be Navajo, but most of us aren't. And so this is a little bit like a foreign language, or it's a different religion, a whole different set of stories. But one of the things that I understand is part of Navajo in general, Native American culture, is an idea of being connected through the generations. They speak of this idea of that you should be concerned about the effects of your actions 7 generations hence, because we are all connected. What was it? Onewa Katakasan. We're all together, all my brothers and me. I think that I wanted Will to imagine that 2 centuries later, or a century later, people would learn about the Navajo and their understanding of sex and nature, and how we should be in harmony with nature as the fulfillment of religion. And that's what this book was. The point of the book was to tell you today about what they did, so that our story becomes one of those ripples. And as you read the book and maybe get inspired to ripple along with, and it's a beautiful idea. I was afraid you were going to ask me to say it, and I used to know how to say it. And I looked at it again. It's got so many vowels.
Yes, it does.
Maha, Bike, Hozo, with Hozo being this idea of harmony. Again, not just, I think Jesus was talking about harmony, but religion, the Christian religion, as it came down to us, ends up being not about harmony, but about right and wrong, and us versus them, and which side is right. And today, all of us, harmony is one of those ideas of the ecological movement. And our modern ecological awareness is telling us that what matters is that we get along together, that we realize that we're all part of some greater being, which is planet Earth, that is struggling to live and grow. And we're the cells of that planet, and we don't want to be cancers on it. We want to be the productive cells that help it grow.
I think that's a wonderful way for us to end this, and to thank you, Toby, for your extraordinary gift to us, not just in this book, but in all of your life's work. And at some point in the future, I hope maybe we can do this again. Write another book, Toby, and we'll come back and talk about it. So we just thank you so much. And Joby, if you will take over now and provide people with information about Toby's website and how they can find out more about him and how to purchase any of his books. And again, I just so strongly recommend this book. Is just a fascinating reading, and there's just so much revelation in there about how all of us can actualize our own lives and our own journeys.
And there's several mystical experiences within the story.
Yes.
that you didn't mention, because that's just, there's so much stuff in there. But
Yes, yes.
there is a beautiful experience that Will has that starts in the sweat lodge, and all of a sudden he goes into an altered state of consciousness. And,
Yes. Yes.
and maybe it's Datura or Peyote or something, we never really know.
Yep.
But it's been in my life. I bet it's been in yours. There are those
Yes,
high moments
yes,
of experience,
yes.
mystical experience, where you feel
Those
oneness with
mystical
God.
experiences where you talk about, when you talk about Will becoming aware of God beyond God, you know, the
Yes,
reality
yeah.
behind our symbols and so forth. So thank you again, Toby and Joby. We're going to try to stay on time tonight.
I know.
So,
I'm gonna risk
God
one
bless you,
thing.
Toby.
And
Thank you.
I think this is so beautiful. And Toby, before we're gonna unmute in a minute and give you a big round of applause. And yes, I've got a slide for your website, but there's a great question. I'm gonna risk. It's 5 till the hour, 6 till the hour. But Mandy and Edie, Mandy, you want to ask Toby your question that you put in the chat. So go ahead and unmute. And Toby, if you could give us maybe a 3 or 4 minute answer. There may not be a 3 or 4 minute answer to this question, but why don't you give it a run? And then we'll thank you, and I'll fire up the slides for your closing. Go ahead, Mandy or Edie.
Yeah, Toby, it's just during the course of your explanation, you know, how do we, and I might have missed this because in the discussions of gender and gender roles and whatnot, but you talked about male and female, which often get conflated, and I'm wondering if you have some thoughts for a minute on the difference between male and female, and the difference between masculine and feminine, whether it's how we see them as in Western culture or how maybe the Navajo saw it, because I think those things get conflated a lot, and maybe shouldn't
Yes. Yes, we have just the choice, one or the other. And masculine is associated with male, and feminine is associated with female. In fact, they blend in people. Let me just say, I'm going to go back to a novel that I read as a child that continues to ring in my head, Perilandra by C.S. Lewis. Does anybody know Perilandra, the space trilogy? C.S. Lewis wrote these 3 novels that are considered science fiction because they are about the main character goes to Mars and goes to Venus, but they're really religious parables. And one of the great moments in that book is that he has an experience of meeting the guiding spirit of the planet Venus and the guiding spirit of the planet Mars. And he observes that human beings think of masculine and feminine as traits that go with sexual behavior, but they're not. They are great ways of universal being, the yin and yang kind of idea. And I think one of the accomplishments that we are reaching today is, and you know, Ken mentioned my idea that we're helping calm patriarchal. I don't know that it's exactly us. It's the spirit of the planet, the guiding spirit of Earth, is waking up to not being so polarized that masculine and feminine go with male and female. It turns out these are all intermixed in all of us. And part of modern gay culture seems to have been the creation of this idea of the metrosexual or mesosexual man, people, straight men who are nonetheless sort of gay, and that masculine and feminine can be blended. And you see this in us, you know, the boys look like boys, and the girls look like girls, but none of us look like Barbie or Ken or the stereotypes. We blend these things.
Yes.
In non-Western cultures, there are understood to be more genders than we've
Yeah.
got. And
Yes.
that's what we see in the
Yeah.
Native American and the Navajo. In India, you know, they've got this idea of the hijras, who are sort of eunuchs or maybe transsexual. It's sort of a little blurred together, but they are people who didn't fit in the way our trans people don't fit in.
Mhm.
So we need a broader idea of genders and more genders, or
Mhm.
certainly not tie them into male and female organs.
One of the things I experienced traveling around Asia was there are places in Asia where gender role is so much more fluid than it is. You know, in our culture, men are supposed to do certain things and not other things, and women are supposed to do certain things and not other things. And I remember going into a village in the jungle in Thailand and seeing men lying in a hammock together with their arms around each other, holding hands. And if that happened here, you know, certain assumptions would be made about that, and their lives might even be in danger. But there, a physical affection between males was an acceptable part of gender role. So thank you, Edie, for that. And thank you, Toby, again. And Joby, it's yours again.
There we go. I'm going to try again. So I'm going to offer. I've pulled up, Toby, last time we talked, and I pulled up your website, which is just very simple, my friends, tobyjohnson.com. There's loads of information and links on there. And yet that's also the quickest way to get to Toby's book on Amazon. If you'd like to curl up with it as the weather changes, as Ken, that was a gorgeous little visual. Thank you, Ken, for that. As the colors turn up here and maybe the heat turns and slows down for y'all down south. But if you go to Toby's website, and then if you look on the left side of the website, it will give you his link to his page on Amazon. I'm going to show you that real quickly. And then what I did is I put in Two Spirits, Toby Johnson, because there are multiple Toby Johnson authors. So just to be clear, to get the right book, and that's got a different cover than you have right now, right, Ken? You hold your book up?
Yes.
Yes,
newer
slightly
edition.
different cover,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep, different cover. So
Yeah.
don't be fooled. It's still Two Spirits. It's still Toby Johnson. And let me make this go away. Oh, I apologize for that.
And now, you know, you can just go to Amazon and order the books. You don't have to go through my website.
Yeah, it's just harder.
The reason I was proposing that is because I get a slight commission, but I also, it gets counted. I can see
Mhm.
sales, and Amazon, I think, then recognizes that my site is sending stuff, and that helps with, you know, how Amazon offers books up for people.
And in my research, Toby, what I was just doing is that if you go straight to Amazon and you just put in your name, there are multiple Toby Johnson authors. So either go to Toby's website, which again allows you to see much more of Toby and his other books and photos and links and other works. Or if you go to Amazon, make sure you put in Toby Johnson, Two Spirits, and it will, either of those will take you there, Toby. So, man, I have to.
Or Toby Johnson gay.
Okay,
None of the other Toby Johnsons.
Do me a favor,
Or
my
at least they
friends,
won't
unmute
exist.
yourselves and give Toby a real live round of applause. Toby, thank you.
Thank you.
Tonight, so we know that it was a big ask to ask you to come back, Toby, and to continue this great conversation between you and Ken. So thank you so much. Just thank you so much. And I want to, again, as I move forward, folks, next week, we are incredibly excited to offer let's see, right here, this introduction to TDF theory next Tuesday night. If there's anyone on the planet that it matters to you to communicate well with, bring them. Like Ken said, if you're a member of a board or member of a club or member of a family or member of a relationship, invite those people. And along the way, go ahead and grab that link to a very quick, we call it an inventory, but it's a very quick series of questions that will give you something called a big lens. And that will allow you to come in next week. We're going to do some work with those different lenses. And like Cheryl said earlier, what TDF theory it works with our brain physiology, and it explains to us why you and I see the exact same input, but we interpret it completely differently, and therefore how we respond to it, the language we use, the body language we use, everything changes because of how our brain interprets that data. So it's a brilliantly fun night. At the end of the day, it's a communication tool, a way to understand yourself and understand others who are different from us. Right after that, we are going to finish the month again with our monthly book club, Where the Forest Meets the Stars. I think if a person reads at a regular pace, you have time to pick that up still. And then, man, oh man, we are full through November, and we just finished our incredible 2020 Advent series in December. You'll see some advertising around that. We have joined forces with all of MCC. Multiple churches have put their resources together this year. So you can really pick and choose and attend many different ways to celebrate the Advent season. So we just joined, and we're incredibly excited to bring Beauty, Edie, and Mandy, your family are going to participate right one night in our candle lighting ceremony. There'll be a teaching again on the great religions and how they work with each of the themes of Advent. There'll be a conversation that's seasonal, and we're going to close with beautiful music each night from a soloist. So we're incredibly excited to bring that to you. And we thank you once again for spending your Tuesday Sanctuary Online. Blessings, my friends. God bless. And thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.